Hello and welcome to Blue Chip Now, the podcast that gives you insider access to content that we tailor specifically for our clients. Whether you're climbing the corporate ladder or just seeking smart, efficient intel, we've got the answers to your most pressing financial questions. Join us as we break down the markets, debunk the headlines, and keep you ahead of the curve. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Blue Chip Now. You have Daniel Dusina, Chief Investment Officer.
Matt Mondu, Senior Financial Advisor.
And Dan Cedar, Managing Partner.
And we will kick off today with a discussion on the equity markets before moving our way into fixed income. This episode will be a little bit different than usual just because I think the subject matter of this episode will be, I would say, focused on the markets, but there's a lot of underpinnings that we want to unpack. It's not like there's some specific news items or five specific stories we want to kind of highlight. So this one will be a little bit more fluid, but I think there's enough to keep us entertained, to say the least. So without further ado, I'll jump into it. And let's start on the stock market side of the equation. We had December kick off with a fairly rough start, specifically if you looked at information technology and crypto. Markets opened the month on somewhat shaky footing. You had the first day of the month where major indexes dropped, and you saw investor sentiment somewhat shift away from the high growth tech and crypto linked stocks. You had cryptocurrencies tumbling, and that also dragged down some companies with cryptocurrency exposure. And so that risk-off mood reflected some broader concerns. Those would be persistent inflation, uncertainty about interest rate moves by the Federal Reserve, and a general sense that valuations, especially in tech and crypto, may have gotten ahead of themselves.
Daniel, do we know, is there some other underlying issue with crypto, or is this simply a reflection of sentiment and where investors are going?
To me, it's purely sentiment driven, at least to my knowledge. There hasn't been anything earth shattering from the perspective of the, call it, foundational underpinnings of crypto.
Got it.
I do think that even though cryptocurrencies have kind of been part of the sales pitch for them, has been they're a diversifier, and hypothetically they should not be related to or correlated with other securities. I think what you get is what we saw in the very early goings of December, which is that they move with other risk assets.
Mm-hmm. Highly correlated to technology.
Can be, sure.
Can be.
Well, they're certainly not correlated to gold this year, right? Gold's
Right.
up over 50%, and crypto is not.
Yeah.
So is it the safe haven status, or the things that we, it gets labeled as, really aren't coming through the data?
Well, and I think that also, the follow-on point to that is that market rebound that we saw immediately thereafter. I guess the point is that slump did not stick. You had a bit of a reversal after the very early innings of December, in which AI optimism and Federal Reserve rate cut hopes started to fuel a turnaround. Over the next several trading sessions after, I think it was just the first 2 days of December, you had a wave of optimism around AI, particularly strength in some mega cap tech names. That helped really reignite investor appetite. And so by the end of last week, that would have been December 5th, U.S. equity benchmarks had posted some fairly solid gains. And so that rally was underpinned not just by tech stock enthusiasm, but also by growing hopes that the Federal Reserve will be cutting rates this week, which has certainly served to boost investor confidence. Now, before I unpack some of that, there are certainly mixed signals going on, I think, as evidenced by that first week of December trading. And one thing we wanted to highlight is that manufacturing remains somewhat soft. One item that we watch, and according to the latest release from the Institute for Supply Management, or ISM, the U.S. Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index fell to 48.2 in November. That's firmly below the 50.0 threshold that separates expansion from contraction. And more notably, that marks the 9th straight month of contraction in the manufacturing sector. A couple of quick tidbits on this report. Number one, I'll call out at a headline, this Purchasing Manager Index and its services-related counterpart is survey-driven, so specifically surveys purchasing managers about their thoughts on the path forward over the next 6 months, and it has a bunch of sub-indices within it. So, for example, The new orders index within this report dropped to 47.4, which is the third straight month of contraction. And this one is generally thought of as a very forward-looking piece of the report. So to see new orders dropping and firmly in contractionary territory, I think that should be taken as a negative. And that really does just suggest that demand for manufactured goods is softening. Fewer orders, weaker production outlooks, which can sometimes signal a slowdown in that part of the economy. At the same time, I wouldn't say that all the parts of this manufacturing read were bad. The production index apparently returned to modest expansion territory. And interestingly, supplier deliveries improved. And said another way, deliveries are getting faster and inventories rose. So you're kind of getting this mixed bag in which manufacturing kind of seems to be a weak link, demand is somewhat weakening, and firms are just generally exhibiting some level of caution. And that does tend to drag on growth, corporate investment, and even things like hiring in manufacturing heavy industries. All of those things can ripple across the economy.
And we do know, manufacturing is a smaller component of the U.S. economy. As we switch to consumption, service-based, but still, it's important. This data is important.
That's where I was going. When you say it's smaller, how much smaller? What are we talking about here?
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel, but it's like an 80-20. We're probably 80% services. I think manufacturing is more like 20%.
Wow, okay. I didn't realize it was that.
Yeah, it's somewhere around there. I don't have an exact number, but last we looked at this, the numbers in my head are something like 70-30, 80-20, somewhere around there. So it is, whatever the number is, I think if you just think of the majority, right, services-driven economy, and I think that's, it's, I don't want to say obvious, but like that's what people think about. We're not an export-driven economy. We're not a China where we are adding to GDP because we're producing things and selling them to other countries or individuals of other countries. So even though that is the case, you do have some semblance of that knock-on effect from a weak manufacturing environment. The employment base, even though the manufacturing sector is not a dominant portion of GDP, there still is a healthy component of labor that is related to manufacturing. So that ripple effect is where you might see it pretty predominantly.
Yeah. And there's been a push to bring manufacturing back here to the United States, but with it being the minority and services being the majority, what about services? How are services stacking up?
Well, and so just as I mentioned before, like we have these purchasing manager indexes. There is one for the services side of things as well. So I would say it's been a bit of a different story where you've had the manufacturing PMI been in contraction for, I think, 9 straight months. The services side has remained in modest expansion. So the latest ISM services PMI reading rose to 52.6 from 52.4 prior. So you're seeing not just expansion, but accelerating expansion. And what that suggests is that business activity and services continues. Companies are seeing work, getting orders, delivering services. Employment in services-oriented sectors ticked up slightly, though that one did remain below 50, which signals that slight contraction on the sub-index level. And that just kind of tells you a similar story to what we're seeing across the broader labor market, and it's that hiring remains fragile despite some overall growth in the services component of the U.S. economy.
So services good, manufacturing bad. Services is way larger than manufacturing. Are things really that bad?
I would argue no. I think this is very consistent with how I've been looking at the economy for the majority of this year, and it's that I would caution individuals in the U.S. to expect the banner growth, for example, the close to 4% GDP growth we saw in the second quarter of this year. I don't think that there's a high likelihood that persists and continues in the call it current quarter and the quarters immediately to come. But that doesn't mean that we're going to immediately enter into a negative GDP growth type environment.
Yeah, and Matt, so you have the economy, which is one thing, and you have the markets, which are something completely different. If there's signs of cracks in the economy, what does that necessarily mean for the markets?
Well, this is one of the situations, or can be one of the situations, where bad news is good news, right? So if you start to see services soften, you could see more aggression from the Fed on rate cuts, which could also prop up the markets, or the markets can perform well under that environment.
So looser monetary policy, money market yields dropping, cash on the sidelines, moving from cash to something else. Something else could be stocks.
Exactly, and that's out there. The other counter, and we might get to this a little more in depth, but if it's stagflation light, where we have persistent inflation with low growth, then cutting rates for the Fed becomes very challenging, and that would be a situation where you could expect markets to tread water. So I think the mixed report, it's not all bad news, it's not all good news. There's always an element of uncertainty, and markets do climb a wall of worry, as we say. But yeah, the Fed's got a tough job going forward, and could the market be doing better? Sure. I mean, I said the economy, yeah, but it's really not all that bad.
When is Jerome Powell out?
Is that? I think that's next year, right?
Yeah, I know it's coming up. I know
he doesn't have to be out. It's looking like he's not going to be the front runner to stay as chair.
Okay.
Well, I guess on that point, so the Federal Reserve has their December meeting this week, the 9th and the 10th of December, and it's become an all but certainty that we will get another 25 basis point rate cut, which I think, Matt, you alluded to this. I'm in the camp where I don't necessarily see a 25 basis point rate cut as overly necessary at this juncture. I mean, you've seen the market clearly anticipate it. That's why you got a grind higher in the equity market, and you're seeing it by way of lower short-term bond yields, at least U.S. Treasury yields. To me, the risk of cutting rates in a healthy economy and stoking further inflation is much higher than the benefit that you would receive from front-running economic softness. That's just my perspective at this specific juncture.
Well, Daniel, I would even say, you could argue, we had talked about this before the podcast. I mean, you're seeing that in the data. Like the 10-year yield went up.
Yeah, and I just, to me, it's like you had this wonky period where we had no official government data, and now you're getting some of that start to roll in. I don't see what is really the realistic difference between waiting now until early next year to assess and rifle through the outstanding data and then make a decision to move? Whether or not 25 basis points now versus 3 months from now actually matters, that's up for debate. But I guess in reality, you are getting the bond market start to move around pretty meaningfully.
But isn't that when market moving events occur? So if the markets are anticipating a 25 basis point cut and then it doesn't happen, that's when you see you'll see choppiness, volatility down. You'll see a downward move in the markets.
100%. I mean, to me, there's the most meaningful catalyst for why the equity market kind of drawdown that we saw at the very beginning of December didn't stick is because of anticipation of rate cuts. But you have seen a bit of a mixed bag in terms of rate movement. So against this kind of mixed economic backdrop that we talked about earlier, you have long-term U.S. Treasury yields, especially call it the 10-year and beyond, has gotten that jolt upward. Today we've got the 10-year Treasury yield that has risen to around 4.19%, and that's at its highest in over 3 months. So in addition to some of the Fed activity, there's some other items that'll drive Treasury yields. For example, broader global market stress, a sell-off in Japanese debt. You're starting to see some of that. These minutia type items that do have an impact. But then also you're kind of seeing what's being reflected as a bear steepener dynamic, a steepening U.S. Treasury yield curve, meaning short-term rates down, long-term rates up. Why might this be happening? Well, it might be happening because even though investors may suspect that you have short-term rates on, moving downward, longer-term inflation or economic risks can cause longer-term bond yields to remain high. So, in other words, you're starting to see fixed income investors demanding more compensation for longer duration risk. So that could be because they see inflation or economic uncertainty remaining stubborn, or because they're losing confidence in bonds if growth weakens. This is a fluid situation right now.
Generally to me, I think of the 10-year, if you still believe it's a risk-free asset, U.S. Treasury, which could be up for debate, but go with me here. If economic uncertainty were high, you would expect to see yields fall. So really at the end of the day, this seems to me to be investors saying that they want to be compensated for the higher level of risk of persistent inflation.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's fair. Like, that's exactly why I'm saying I don't know if we need to be cutting interest rates like so aggressively right now. And I think that's what the bond market is telling you. The equity market is telling you they love it, but the bond market is telling you they're basically debating it right now. In your face.
Yep.
So at the same time, like there's this constant, push and pull between rates and other items. I mean, certainly if you were to get this spike in yields to kind of play out a little bit further, of course, the natural or direct effect is that, you could make borrowing more expensive for companies and households, cool investment and spending from corporations, but they can also weigh on equity valuations, especially for those high growth and rate sensitive sectors. So, that's just going to be something to continue to watch. And, this whole divergence between a weak manufacturing sector and a services sector that is held up, I think stepping back a little bit, you're getting a suggestion that the U.S. economy might be undergoing this sectoral reshifting. Heavy industry, manufacturing, and trade exposed to global supply chain issues and tariffs and cost pressures, those things might continue to lag. I think there's just a lot in flux there. While you've got consumption-driven sectors, aka services, very related to consumer spending that carry more weight, this shift isn't going to be even. And what I would say is that, despite all this and despite all the concerns, I mean, you have had a consumer that has held up relatively well. And, at the highest levels, consumer spending is by far and away the most impactful item of U.S. GDP. So that's where I would be concerned that if you get this stagflation-like conditions, meaning high inflation and no growth, that's where it would be really challenging. And again, why I would be a proponent of holding rates firm here. But again, we can go into the minutia and slice and dice things all we want, but above all else, things do appear to be fine on the surface. The economy is still growing. Corporate results have actually been fairly compelling, and I don't necessarily see that changing. There's just a lot of complications with a data lag and a Federal Reserve that's moving and a year that has been quite eventful.
Been a good year for stocks, been a good year for bonds.
Right. Yeah.
Well said. Good year for international stocks.
Yeah.
Across the board.
I think capital markets in general.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's a wrap on Blue Chip Now for this go around. We always thank you for listening and look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Not sure if we're going to record again for the holidays, but if not, happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Well said. Enjoy that time with friends, family, and otherwise. Thanks for listening. Speak to you next time.